to talk about articulations of liberalism in the social sphere. And when we're talking about articulations of liberalism in the social sphere, we could divide this up into liberal values in the sphere of gender justice, liberal values and caste movements, or the operation of caste, and also liberal values and the broad area of emotional freedom or emotional autonomy. So let's come to gender justice and liberal values. Now again, if you want to have an idea of how to approach gender justice from the point of view of a liberal standpoint, I would say do again read Mahatma Gandhi, because he has spoken very passionately on gender justice. And I'll read out one quote of Gandhi which I think is very, very telling, and I think that it's something that we can all learn from. Gandhi says, "Why do not women enjoy the same freedom as men do? Why should they not be able to walk out and have fresh air? Chastity is not a hothouse growth. It cannot be protected by the surrounding wall of the parda. It must be as defiant as Sita. Ram would be nowhere without Sita, free and independent as he was himself. For robust independence, Draupadi is a better example. Draupadi was a giant oak." Also, Gandhi says, without the free, independent woman, there can be no social progress. And those who campaign for free, independent women also campaign for free, independent men. So the struggle for gender justice is not just about women, it's actually also gender justice for men, because men have equal right to be liberated from stereotypes of manhood or stereotypes of what is today called toxic masculinity as women do, as women have the same right to be liberated from stereotypes. Now, the situation for gender justice in India at the moment is not a very good one. As you know, the Thomson Reuters Foundation in 2018 listed India as the most dangerous place for women. Crimes against women are rising. Attitudes against women are hardening. There is a militant traditionalist backlash against women. And women in large numbers are dropping out of the workforce. So the workplace is increasingly not considered safe for women, and the rise in a kind of patriarchal culture has resulted in women increasingly opting not to work. Now, this patriarchal culture is upheld not just by men but also by women. There's been a lot of citizens' protest and a lot of citizens' action in the area of gender justice, and this is where I think we can draw hope for the liberal project in India, that liberal values and progressive values are alive and well in the struggle for justice for women. Sometimes, however, this gender justice, or the quest for gender justice, faces a very powerful enemy. And the powerful enemy comes in the form of women themselves. You would have known recently about the film Padmavat, which ran into a lot of controversy because it depicted a possible love affair between Rani Padmavati and Sultan Alauddin Khilji. Now, the curious thing to me about the agitation against the film Padmavat was how many women actually came out onto the street and said they would commit sati and they would commit jauhar if this film was released. To me, that was a illustration that women themselves were willing to wage war on their own bodies. Women were willing to declare war on themselves in order to satisfy some cultural notion of purity, or a cultural notion of the so-called Bharatiya Nari, that women were willing to push themselves into death. Not that anyone would do it, but the fact that they were even offering to do it seemed to me a serious setback for liberal values. because those of us who have been involved in the struggle for gender justice and in the struggle for equality, both in the economic sphere and the social sphere, were taken aback by how many women are actually willing to turn their back on the quest for equality and declare war on themselves in order to satisfy cultural notions of purity by saying that we will voluntarily commit sati. Now the whole reform movement associated with sati, the abolition of sati, this was the big achievement for liberal enlightenment values in India, for liberal enlightened values in India, and yet there were women willing to actually go back to that ancient practice and actually perform it themselves. So this was something that I believed was a tremendous setback to the operation of liberal values in India and to spreading the liberal consciousness within India. Now, why are crimes against women becoming so rampant in India today, and why do women find themselves at the receiving end of so much gender injustice? Why is it that the attempt to spread liberal values in society and to insist on an equality for men and women is facing so much setback, is facing so many hurdles? In many ways, the liberal quest for social change or the liberal quest for reform is about convincing stakeholders, is about a dialogue, is about persuasion, is about introspection, is about talking to people to make them understand the necessity of change. If change is imposed from the top by legislative diktat or by political diktat, there is often a backlash. There is often a kind of a hardening of attitudes. And I would say that state action or state legislation, state-sponsored legislation for women's empowerment can at times create this kind of militant traditionalist backlash. Now let me give an example of how I see this happening. The Sabarimala case, for example, where women's groups have been agitating to enter the shrine. Now, as you know, the Sabarimala shrine prohibits women between the ages of 18 and 55 from entering the shrine on the grounds that the deity is a celibate and therefore needs to be so-called protected from women. Now, I find it patently immoral and absurd that menstruating women should be kept out of a religious shrine on grounds of impurity. If a shrine is a public place, then according to the constitution, no one can be considered impure, and no impurity arising from caste or gender or any other impurity, so-called impurity, can be used to keep people out from a shrine. So that is my personal view, that it is immoral and absurd to keep menstruating women out from a shrine on the grounds of their impurity, on the grounds of a bodily function, on the grounds of their menstruation capacity at that age. That to me is deeply absurd. However, when the court ruled that women should be allowed to enter, we saw the kind of backlash and the kind of massive protest that happened in Sabarimala. Now, much of that protest could have been politically manufactured, but at the same time, there was a lot of anxiety among traditional-minded people that their traditional beliefs were being compromised by the court, that traditional belief systems were being compromised by the judicial order. That's why I believe that as a liberal, we must always try and convince, persuade, dialogue and interact rather than seek refuge in state action or in state-imposed diktats. That's what Gandhi would have done. Gandhi and Raja Ram Mohan Roy basically created social awareness and created social change through the process of social interaction, through the process of persuasion, through the process of dialogue, through the process of talking to people to make them understand and to make the larger society become stakeholders in change. Now, When the larger society is prevented from a dialogue, or there is no scope for interaction and there is only state action or state sponsored legislation, then there tends to be a backlash. So how do we create change? I believe we need to create change by constantly creating a process of dialogue, awareness, and building our interactions with people. And that's where I feel that the cause for gender justice needs to go. Now, we're facing crimes against women at an unprecedented level today. Yes, there are laws. Yes, there is legislation, but it's still not a deterrent. Why is that? It's because we are not spending enough time in talking, in interacting at the school level, at the primary level, at the college level, to make stakeholders understand what gender justice is and why gender justice is important. Gender justice is not just about women, it's about men, it's about society, it's about well-being. Now, we were all terribly upset and society was convulsed by the Nirbhaya rape and murder, as you know, in 2012. Now that resulted in an amazing document. The Verma Committee report that was created after the Nirbhaya protests, to me is a Magna Carta for women's rights in India. And I believe it's a source of great hope. So and the Verma Committee report emphasizes precisely this, that not only is legislative action important, not only are laws important, not only is a tough neutral police important, what is extremely important as well is the constant process of social awareness and social change and personal change. And that is where we need to go. Now, when we're talking about liberal values in the sphere of gender justice, I want to say that there was a time when women were incredibly involved in public life in India. And this was during the national movement, during the freedom movement led by Gandhi. This was a time when women came out in their numbers, and I'm not just saying elite women, but women at the rural level, at the small town level, all came out in their numbers to participate in the Gandhian struggles for freedom. So this was a period which saw an incredible efflorescence of women coming out and participating in India's freedom movement and in the national movement. And not only did you have figures like Aruna Asaf Ali or the Rajkumari Amrit Kaurs, or you had the tremendous women revolutionaries of like Sarojini Naidu who came in, but you also had women at the grassroots level participating. So that, I would say, is the high point of women's political and social activism in India, and I think was a moment of celebration for liberal values for women, because men and women were united in that sense, in that progressive movement for freedom. What has happened since then is that the women's movement got tremendous impetus from the national movement. The founders of India were very, they were passionate about gender justice, and the women's movement went from strength to strength. In the 1970s, the women's movement was extremely strong. It was led by the left, but it was an extremely strong movement. You saw the very positive women's movement that happened around the 1972 Mathura rape case. Now that was an important, very important crime against a minor girl, Mathura, and the judge let the accused off, and that led to a huge movement among women and actually led to the enunciation of major rape laws in India. So the Mathura rape case was a moment when, again, the Indian women's movement really came together and pressed for changes in India's rape laws. The same thing happened on the Bhavari Devi gang rape. There again we saw an efflorescence of the women's movement. These terrible crimes, heinous crimes against women, have brought out major protest movements, and these protest movements have created real change. The Nirbhaya protest movement, and I was a witness to that protest movement, it was tremendously powerful. 3 days in the cold of December at India Gate, women were gathering in their numbers. And not just young women, but mothers and school principals and um, leaders of society, they all came together in that really remarkable protest movement. And this is where one can draw hope for the liberal project in India, is the tremendous citizens' activism that arises during these heinous crimes. And that protest movement, as I have said before, led to the enunciation of the Verma Committee report on crimes against women, and actually there were changes made to rape laws, and the Criminal Law Amendment Bill of 2013 came into being. So that was a very important moment for the women's movement, because it actually forced changes in law. However, since then, there has been this worrying rise in a kind of misogynistic, patriarchal culture that has taken hold. And the reason why I believe that this is happening, why this backlash against women is happening, why a kind of militant traditionalism is taking hold, is because it is perceived that that state action is being used to push the cause of women. Now, one of these legislations, which I believe is actually a disservice to the women's cause and disservice to liberal values and gender justice, is the Women's Reservation Bill, that is reserving 33% seats for women by legislation. Now, this, I believe, is retrogressive. It does not serve the cause of women. Why should women have to have reserved seats in order to compete or in order to contest elections? This will again create that backlash. It will again create a backlash against women. It will also be taken over by men, and they will use this Women's Reservation Bill to put in their bahus and their betis. A much better way to actually get women to participate more in politics is actually to reform politics, to make politics less violent, to make it less focused on money and muscle power, to make it less focused on gunda power, so that politics is made a safe, fear-free environment in which women can participate equally. They will be able to participate equally if politics is less of a violent activity, if politics is less about big money, if politics is less about use of all kinds of lawless powers. So I believe reforming politics is the way to bring more women in. If we do want to reserve or have reservations for women in politics, I believe we should reserve tickets. Then if you really want to create quotas for women, then reserve tickets. Why reserve seats? Give tickets to women. Let women contest. Let women compete equally. And then let them come in.